So basically, the literature here is not absolutely indicative of a certain, result. But there is a very, very recent paper which says that any kind of, loud speech, probably the way that I'm talking, that results in like, 1,000 particles being emitted. If I'm talking for a minute, then like 1,000 particles may be emitted, and those may linger in the air for about 8 minutes. Okay, so and you know that the most efficient modality of transmission of this novel coronavirus is basically by droplet transmission, right? And
Yes.
so if you now have a directed flow of air, which is basically going to transmit the particles that are emanating from my mouth, or like, when I breathe or sneeze or whatever I do, if that those particles are basically just transferred by the air from, say, point A where I am standing or sitting to point B where you are standing or sitting, then obviously, and you do not have an efficient mask, or masks, that way these viruses are only some 125 nanometers average size, and masks actually will not be that efficient if you really have a large flux of viruses invading you. So that there is an issue. There is, of course, an issue. And especially if you have malls where the ventilation is not great, there's no fresh supply of air that is being taken in. If they have not really updated their systems or cleaned their air, filters and all that, I think those stand a greater risk. Central air conditioning actually, yeah, might be worse, if
Yeah,
it's not well maintained.
that's what I was kind of coming at, because how does it like make a difference that, because there are studies which also show that the virus spreads differently outdoors and spreads differently indoors. So when you put a large group of people in a confined space and it is centrally air conditioned, what role does that play? Does it actually impact? And also I wanted to ask, does it matter like the air filters, how effective will they be given
Right.
like in a place like a mall?
Yeah. So, see, it's if you have this particular modality of droplet transmission, then it is essentially the air which carries. So that mode does not change whether you're outside or inside. I mean, if there are air currents, which will essentially take the virus that is emanating from an infected person into a non-infected person, that would be the same whether you're inside or outside. It's just the airflow which will take the virus, from point A to point B. Now, if you're outside, then what happens is there is air everywhere, right? I mean, there's not really a collimated direction in which air is blowing all the time. I mean, it just keeps on shifting. You have air from different directions. So the probability of, air coming from point A to point B directly is much lesser than when you have this air current which is coming from a blower of an AC, which is very much in one direction. Especially in central ACs, if they are using circulated, if you're just recirculating the air that is always there, if they're not drawing in fresh air, then that obviously is a greater threat, because central AC means, air from room A can actually be taken into room B, right? And if there
Okay.
is an infected person in room A, then that actually goes into the system, and that can be blown into different directions. So that is basically the difference between central AC and a single room AC. So a single room AC, of course, if you are there with an infected person, again, there is an issue, but then it
Mm-hmm.
is basically if you have the infected person in that room.
Mm.
If there is the person in some other place of the house or wherever you are standing,
Mm-hmm.
that does not have any risk. But the central AC essentially means that you have a common, that there are blowers and there are vents, and the
Mm-hmm.
air from different places are circulated back and forth. So that, of course, gives an added risk.
Do you think there should be some set of precautions that the management should take? Because nobody can guarantee that nothing will happen in such a
Right.
scenario. But is there some sort of preventive measures that can be
Yeah,
taken?
so this is, I think, see, what one can basically do is try to reduce the probability of transmission, right?
Yes.
So you cannot be like, directly saying that, okay, this place there's going to be infection. It's just probability is going to be reduced. It's the same as, when you are traveling on say a motorcycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like exposed everywhere, and you often are going to be, hurt. by the mistakes of others, right? So if
Yes.
there's an infected person in a mall, then the probability is there, because it is not open ventilation. It's not like perfect ventilation, as
Yeah.
I might say. What you actually have is, again, air from one place drawn into the other. It cannot be as good as outside, so the risks will be there. In terms of precautions, I think physical distancing is very crucial. You cannot have, I think, yeah. So basically, as you know, the closer you are to an infected person, the larger is the probability of your picking up the infection from that person, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you ensure that you do not have more than a particular number of people in the mall at a certain time, that obviously means that the direct, the distance between people who do not know each other, and of course therefore do not know if one is infected or not, then that reduces. So I think the number of people entering the mall has to be restricted, especially if the mall is close to some kind of a containment zone. I think that is
Okay.
crucial. Uh, then I would say that if you have your filters, I think they should be checked, because remember that the virus has a host. So it's not that the virus of 125 nanometers is floating around. So they need some droplets to actually go through, right? I
Yeah.
mean, to sort of, so the virus sits on a droplet and the droplet flows. So the
Yes.
droplets, when we actually talk, there's a large spectrum of size of droplets that come out, right? So that changes from, say, maybe even 10 to 20 microns to like 100 nanometers or like 0.1 microns. So the virus can occupy any of the droplets. So if you have a good filter, that of course will filter away the more coarser droplets, which might actually have larger viral load, right? So obviously you need to get the your filters serviced, top condition, no sort of compromise there, because I think that is important. Because if you have good filters, at least you're cutting off a considerable portion of the droplets that are emanating from a person when that person is, an infected person. When that person is talking or sneezing or coughing or whatever without adequate protection. Of course, it has to be ensured that no one comes in without masks.
Okay.
That has to be that if you don't have a mask, you should not be allowed inside.
Enter.
That is
Yes.
straight away, right? Because this can actually be a difference between getting infected and it's like the same as wearing a helmet when you're driving a motorcycle, right?
Yes.
Just one bang of the head can be the end of your life. Whereas, well, here it's not. I would say it's that bad, but because finally one has to realize that paranoia is not a solution. This is not a disease which is going to be a killer like cancer or like HIV or something. But it's still, if you
Exactly.
are immunocompromised or something, this will have bad effects.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Quint, sir. Is there anything else you would wish to add,
Yeah.
like to the
So
people?
basically, yeah. So I'm actually, we scientists have this forum called the Indian Scientists Response Against Coronavirus. So we
Okay.
have a website called insightcove.in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would just, ask all members of the public to just come and visit that site, because, all these questions are answered with a lot of detail, just taking the information. And nothing is there which does not have a scientific foundation, and decide for yourselves.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Quint, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.